It is the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today, we'll look back at our pretty insipid 1-0 defeat to West Ham on Wednesday night in the Premier League. At the end of the podcast, we'll also look ahead to our fifth round match in the FA Cup against Southampton at home. Well, it was a night of opportunity, wasn't it? But Fulham did not take it. A weird lineup, weird refereeing decisions, a very weird mix-up between Bernd Leno and Bassey, and the Hammers walked away with all 3 points to boost their chances of Premier League survival. A bleak night at a foggy Craven Cottage, and there's probably a bit of brain fog amongst the two hosts. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Sammy. How you doing?
All right, thank you. I've had an interesting 12 hours because I watched us lose 1-0 to West Ham, which was immensely frustrating, and then I listened to my 6-week-old baby cry all night. So in all, I'm a man on the edge, Jack. I'm a man on the edge. I just needed Fulham to win, and I might be able to be okay today. But yeah, I feel like if you're in the Godalming area and you just see a man like shouting at the bushes later, it's me, and you'll know why.
Yeah, I mean, look, I picked a terrible night not to have a pint. Is probably what I would describe this as. I was like, you know what, big weekend, try and take the week clean and detox a little bit, and then I was sat through that being like, well, what am I doing? Like,
I think a pint might have sent me over the edge. I think a genuine thing if I had any element of a hangover today, I think this would be too much. I think I'd have cancelled.
One of those sitting in the pub afterwards, having a Guinness Zero instead was, a low point, Sammy. A low point. Let's leave it at that.
I'm starting with an early question for you, Jack. Tom Burrows said, "Quick one, lads. Just wondering if everyone does a whip round, if Sammy and Jack would be up for some marriage counselling after the recent bickering on the pod. Cheers from Tom." I don't think we'd bicker. Did we bicker?
We didn't bicker. You decided to bring up, some of the things that I said in the past to try and justify a point that you were making that was wrong. So it's just one of those. It's all right, man. Like, these are the moments we have. I call them tiffs. I enjoy them.
I've had quite a few people mention the word obtuse to me this week. It's just a great adjective, isn't it?
It's a great descriptor. It was exactly the right descriptor in that moment as well.
It was very Shawshank Redemption. Whenever I hear the word obtuse, I think of Andy Dufresne being called obtuse. What'd you call me? You're forgetting yourself, son.
So you should have done that at the time. That would have been really funny.
It actually did cross my mind, and then I was just like, I couldn't exactly remember the quote, but yeah, it shows how many times I've watched Shawshank Redemption. Jack, what were your favourite 3-word reviews from last night?
Look, I enjoyed these because there was a set of them where you were like, okay, yeah, I really feel like we're going through the same motions again here. Jim at Jungle Jim K said surfs up again, which I enjoyed very, very much. Jerry Cottage 97 said same script again. Liam Byrne, Death by Hope. Edward Winston Malone said team of strangers. Londinium calling with hammer and wrongs. Matt Chantry had Silver's selection stinker. Random Fulham stuff with Burnt's birthday befuddlement, which I thought was excellent. And our very own Avas Malik with forever blowing opportunities, which feels apt and a nice way to get into this frustrating evening at the Cottage.
Hammer and Wrongs is very good. That's an underrated gem in there. But yeah, I saw Avas's and it's very, very good. Well, we had to start with the lineup, Jack. It was one of those where I couldn't believe my eyes. And at first you're like, is there injuries here? You never know exactly what's gone into it. And then you look at the bench, you're like, well, it doesn't seem like there's injuries. Of course, there are some changes in this lineup that are completely reasonable. Harry Wilson's obviously picked up a knock. It's a blow. But I think anyone that's watched a lot of Fulham this season would think, okay, look, like Harry isn't the be all and end all that I think a lot of people think he is to this team. Obviously his goals and assists have been vital, but Samuel Chukwueze has been great. You can put him at the right wing. It's not an actual huge loss. And Robinson in for Sessegnon, maybe you can see that one because of the threat of Jared Bowen and you need something a bit more defensively. We'll come on to Anthony Robinson. I mean, a dire night going forward, but kept Jared Bowen relatively quiet defensively, at least. It's in the middle, which is particularly strange. In comes Josh King and Tom Cairney. I went Oscar Bob and Emil Smith-Rowe. Oscar Bob obviously was on the left, which meant that Alex Iwobi moved from midfield to the left wing.
The thing, Sammy. So, like on this point, when I saw the lineup and then I looked at it the first time, I was like, okay, that's how I would look at it. I wonder if that's Josh King on the left. And then I went on to Live Score and BBC Sport, and the whole thing looked like, on those apps, it looked like Josh King on the left with Tom Cairney in the 10 and Alex Iwobi in the spot where, he's been all season, or at least since November. And I was sort of looking at it thinking, if that's the case, I don't mind it. But I've just got a sneaky suspicion that that's not the case, that it's going to be Iwobi on the left-hand side. And the frustration when you see him kind of move out to that area. And look, you know how much of a fan I am of Alex Iwobi. I absolutely adore the geezer. And what a performance he put in at the weekend in the middle of the park. He was absolutely everywhere, up and down, creating, making things happen, tracking back, making the tackles he needed to make. It was just a really complete performance. To then shift him out wide after putting in a performance like that against Spurs felt like such a bizarre decision. And from the moment that we started the game with that as the setup, I was sitting there going, I just don't love it. And I think, we'll come on to Sander Berge, I'm sure, because he had an awful game last night. But with Iwobi next to him, he looks better, I think. With Cairney next to him, he's almost expected to do a little bit more in terms of getting forward and trying to kind of like be more dynamic. And I actually think he's, most useful when he's just doing the real basic stuff and kind of recycling possession in that number 6 role. So all of the changes, yes, some of them enforced, but Oscar Bob had obviously, done very well at the weekend. We're all excited to see kind of a little bit more of him and see if he could kind of nail down a spot. With the Wilson injury, it just felt like the natural thing to do was to persist with that and make that stick. And instead we, end up with this really disjointed, team. And I think that, that message from Edward Winston Malone saying team of strangers is exactly what it felt like. All of the reference points were out. All of the combinations that we saw work so beautifully at the weekend just went missing all of a sudden. And that doesn't mean that everybody was dreadful. There were no good periods, because I thought we started the game okay. But it just felt like once the connections ran dry and once we, kind of got through that initial period where we tried to play some nice football and a couple of things had broken down, we didn't have that wherewithal and connection in the team to make it all stick together again.
And I get that there are mitigating factors here beyond just like Wilson's injury. Silva had said in the build-up that he's trying to preserve Oscar Bob's minutes. He's only recently arrived at the club and he's not been a regular starter, so suddenly 2 games in a week. That was what he insinuated through his press conference. Ryan Sessegnon is fit. I mean, admittedly, you've got a problem at left back, but you can put Ryan Sessegnon on the left, or you can put one of King or Smith-Rowe on the left. For me, it was just that overthinking, like to break up that midfield pairing, which I don't know. I'd say in the last 2 months, since the return of AFCON at least, Iwobi's been Fulham's player of the second half of the season, right? Like absolutely, undoubtedly. And the plaudits and the praise, it's all coming from his performance in the centre midfield. For that to me had to be the absolute last resort that Iwobi's on the left. I'd rather Tom Cairney to go on the left.
Well, that's like Josh King can play on the left. We've seen him come on the wing multiple times over the course of this season. And as you say, there are options. The thing is about the Oscar Bob minutes, I get it, right? Like I understand what Silva's getting at there. But if he's then going to start the weekend against Southampton, are we just doing the same thing? Like, why not start this team against Southampton at the weekend? The players that have come in here and need minutes, and I get it. You want Tom Cairney as club captain to be getting minutes and feel like he's a big part of this team, and so he should, right? Like he is a big part of this team. But that at the weekend felt like a game for TC to come in and control and be able to dominate in the middle of the park. This never really felt like that. I just feel like we've over-rotated here. And look, if we go and win against Southampton, then people will say, okay, we've put all of our eggs in the FA Cup basket. And that's okay, right?
Do you think I can't seriously believe he was prioritising the FA Cup?
Well, it looked like that. It looked like that from where I'm standing. And if that is the case, and look, again, we're theorizing here. We're not saying that this is, a dead set thing. We're all kind of speaking in what we can assume from and what's happened. And we don't know for sure until we see the lineup for Southampton at the weekend. But if that is a stronger lineup than this, that says to me that I'm prioritizing the FA Cup, which is fine, right? Like we've talked about getting to Wembley and the FA Cup being a really important part of this season. But what if we draw City away in the next round?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous. I love the FA Cup. I want to win a trophy more than anything. But if you're playing a percentages game here, what's the most likely route to Europe? Is it finishing 2 places higher in the table that you're currently in, that's 3 or 4 points away? Or is it getting through another 3 rounds of the FA Cup where you could draw anyone and you've got to play and to win the cup, you're going to have to play one of the big boys, probably 2, to win it, right? You're going to have to beat probably an Arsenal, probably a City or a Liverpool. You're going to have to beat one of those at Wembley as well. Like, a patch that Fulham aren't familiar with at all, apart from Cairney. Yes, how could I forget? So I feel like if we're playing a percentages game, I cannot believe, I just don't believe that's what Marco did last night. I think he has principles and beliefs of players being able to play certain positions, and I think he has a hierarchy on the wing. And I think it's Chukwueze, I think it's Kevin, and then I think after that it's Iwobi. I think he just does not want to put it. I mean, he spoke earlier in the season about how Smith Rowe is not an option on the left. Didn't really give his reasoning behind that. And I must just put Josh King in that bracket of not a left winger. But then for me,
he brings Ryan Sessegnon. Like we've seen him bring him on the left wing multiple times this season.
Yeah, I know. I don't get me wrong. I don't understand. And for me, Sess is crying out to get a chance again. I know he played there against Leeds and was not very good, but one opportunity, right? Yeah, I cannot. If that, I'd rather see Sess there again than Iwobi move. It was a crazy, crazy decision. As you say, in the first half, I don't know, there was I had a bit of a gulp because you just felt like West Ham really wanted this as well. This was not Spurs, who turned up like an absolute calamity. As good as Fulham were on Sunday, Spurs just looked like a mess from the start. And West Ham turned up, they were zipping it about. That Tati Castellanos looked quite good in the middle. I mean, I don't think he's the world's best footballer, but he just brings some energy and spark to the side.
To have,
yeah, and just everything about that West Ham team looked energized, up for it. The fans were very, very loud. The Fulham fans were quite subdued. I was nervous for much of the first half. Obviously, the first incident, we've got a few incidents now to roll through. Iwobi handball.
Just before you do that, Sammy, it didn't feel that subdued in the stadium, I didn't think.
No.
It wasn't the atmosphere wasn't dead. And yes, whilst West Ham were very loud after they scored, quite loud at the beginning when they were doing a little protest, which is totally fair enough for what it's worth. I didn't think it was one of those where we were completely drowned out by opposition fans. The atmosphere was pretty lively, I thought. Not, absolutely unbelievable, loudest place on earth, but I thought it was pretty lively.
Fair. I don't know. From home, cannot give you that perspective. I just saw a few comments where people seem to be criticising the atmosphere. But I think atmosphere is one of the most subjective things ever. Some people come away from a game thinking that's the best atmosphere I've ever experienced. And some people come away from it completely saying it was dead and silent and everyone's it was like being in a mortuary. So it's very, very difficult to try and judge that from afar. I just want to go through some of the incidents. It all felt like it might be unraveling with this Iwobi handball. Mm-hmm. It hits his sleeve. There's no doubt about that. Some angles it looks like the arm, some angles it looks like the shoulder. For me, I put this in the camp of if it ain't clear and obvious, it shouldn't be a penalty. It wasn't the middle of his arm. It was a bit of a weird one from Iwobi because I felt like it was almost just a little bit lackadaisical. He could have just moved his chest properly around the ball and it wouldn't have been an issue. It wasn't stopping a goal or anything. He put it out for a corner.
Could have left it going to the side netting, which is where it was going. But alas, it's one of those strange ones. I don't think this is a penalty. I don't think that there's too much in it. And some of the comments online about this, there was Twitter accounts being like, Iwobi's out here playing basketball. West Ham have been robbed. I was like, really? Are we watching the same thing unfold in real time? Look, I think it's a bit silly, and I am, a huge proponent, as you know, of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But I don't think that this is anywhere near, being too low to hit his sleeve. Like, I think it's sort of shoulder top of the arm. I think that whilst they're right to check it because it was a bit dumb. I'm glad that we moved on from it, because I didn't think that there was much in this one in terms of it being, a really obvious move. And again, you're talking about where the ball is going. If anything, West Ham have gained from that because they've got a corner where it was going to be a Fulham goal kick.
Yeah. No, as I say, I think if the referee had given it, I don't know if there would have been sufficient evidence to overturn it. I think
Leno was completely unmoved. I think this is the thing, like standing there next to it and watching it happen in real time, I was like, that's just fine, isn't it? And obviously you get things back on video and you have to change your mind on them. That's fine as well.
It happened a few times last night.
But there were just a couple of bits there. Well, I have thoughts on some of those as well.
Let's move on then to the Josh King free kick that he was challenged by Mateus Fernandez, and he was on a yellow card. The free kick is right on the edge of the box. It's definitely a free kick and not a penalty. That's not up for debate. What is up for debate, though, is, well, I think firstly it's up for debate if it's a foul.
Yeah,
but if it is a foul, which clearly the referee thinks, how in the what world can you give a foul away there? When it was borderline like a goal scoring opportunity. It was a goal scoring opportunity. It's not a red card. I'm not saying that. I don't understand how you can give the foul and not give the yellow card.
Yeah, look, I think that's fair. I think if you give the foul, then you have to book the player, right? But I would say that I actually don't think... I think this is less of a foul than the one on Cairney. Because I think that where Fernandes comes through here, he is clearly making an attempt to play the ball. And, he gets his foot down and then Josh King goes through him. I think that it's not like he's behind Josh and there's contact. He's actually got his foot through there and Josh has sort of kicked through him. So I actually don't think this is a foul. But I think you're right in that if you give the foul, you have to give the yellow card. The ref was weird on cards yesterday. There was a couple of incidents in the first half. There was a really chaotic passage of play that Calvin Bassey sort of boshed a few people out of the way. And it ended with Crescencio Somerville raking his studs down the back of Raul. And it was no attempt to play the ball at all whatsoever. And the referee just didn't give anything at that moment. And it felt incredibly bizarre because it had been a heated passage of play anyway. It was a lot of physicality in it, but it just felt like Crescencio Somerville had kicked out at that moment. Now, I don't think, again, this is a game-defining moment, but it's just one of those strange ones where the referee, look, the West Ham fans were up in arms in the first half about the lack of decisions going their way for about 10 minutes. And when they finally got a decision, there was the usual sarcastic cheers, etc. Fine. But it just felt, and at that time I kind of made the joke and I thought we were mostly getting the decisions. I thought it was mostly getting the decisions right, but we were getting a little bit of the rub of the green on it. So therefore I probably would say that. But the way that changes and some of the decisions then to not book players in certain situations and book others in different situations, it all just felt a bit random. And so look, whilst I agree with you that this, if he's going to give the foul, then it should be a second yellow card, and he's a very lucky boy. I also am of the opinion that's probably not a foul, so I'm okay with the outcome in some regards.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me is actually, if Fernandes had been sent off there, it would have been an awful decision, and rightly a lot of scope would have been placed on it because it was the wrong decision. And maybe you can almost applaud a referee for having common sense, but it's difficult to have common sense in a game that applies the laws so vigorously and to the letter all the time. And then all of a sudden, we're common sense for this one, but not common sense for any of the other ones.
Yeah.
And then Fulham were ordered a penalty on TV. I said at the time, I was like, that's a penalty every day, month of Sundays and on Tuesday. I was like, that's a penalty, no doubt about it. And then you watch the replay and it's a bit of a weird one because Cairney goes to strike the ball and then he kind of kicks Tati Castellanos' back of the leg. And then you're like, oh, actually, maybe it's definitely not a penalty. And then the more you think about it, you're like, but someone's fouled someone here. Cairney on the post-match interview, and look, he's coming from a position of bias, just like we are, obviously. But I do think that Cairney's pretty measured, right? And I think Cairney would say it how it is. And, he wants to be a pundit one day. And so he's not going to go out there kind of completely blinded by bias. And he says, well, it has to be a penalty because I was going to score. That was his words. He said, I would have scored if he doesn't get there. And he doesn't go in and win the ball.
Yes, this is it. This is the key element for me. Does Cairney kick Tati Castellanos? Yes. 100%, right? But also, Tati Castellanos has just stuck his leg in there. He's not won the ball, and he's waited to be kicked. Now, obviously, you can talk about this in different ways, but the way I was thinking about it was the Josh King goal at Chelsea, right? What do we say about that all the time is that Muniz is up in the air, right? And Trevor Chalobah puts his leg under him, and therefore he lands on him. So if his leg is, what's he supposed to do with his leg? So if you, for example, or if someone's up in the air and I just lie down underneath them while they're in the air and they stand on me, should they be sent off? Is that a foul on me? I don't think so. I don't think that's where I want the game to be going. So at that point, look, there's two things here. One, should Cairney just take the shot earlier? Probably, right? He doesn't need the full wind up and therefore he doesn't get connected with by Castellanos and Fulham probably score. Fine. But on the kind of flip side of that, if Tati Castellanos comes in there and he nicks the ball away and then Tom Cairney kicks him, fair enough. But there's no attempt to win the ball. He's just trying to get in the way. And therefore, so Cairney kicks him at that moment and he's effectively going down to strike. So I'm not sure exactly where I land on it, right? I think it's one of those really strange ones where I don't know what the exact rules are. I don't know how the application of the laws works in this situation. But I do wonder if someone goes to take a shot and I just put my leg in front of them and they kick me instead, is that not a foul? Because if someone's running past me, for example, and I put my leg in front of them and they trip over my leg, that's a foul, right? We're all agreed on that situation. But I'm not quite sure here where where it lies in terms of, if you are kicking through something and someone puts their foot in front of you. At the time on the pitch, I thought it was Stonewall. I watched it back and I've read quite a lot of the descriptions of it, etc. And a lot of people were like, yeah, he's kicked Castellanos. And actually, having watched it back myself and kind of tried to think about it in a rules perspective, I'm not really sure what else Tom Cairney is supposed to do. Is he supposed to not have a shot because Tati Castellanos is there? Is that it? So as soon as an opposition player is within the radius of you, you're not supposed to shoot? Because I think that if this was at the other end, people would be going mad about it. I think West Ham fans would be going mad about it and saying that that's an unfair decision. What on earth do you do? And look, I can understand their frustrations and all of the different elements in this, but I think that we have accepted this a bit too meekly, that's not a penalty. I'm not sure what else TC is supposed to do with himself as he's winding up for a shot and someone puts their leg in the way, apart from try to kick the ball. He's not going to shuffle away and move through it or try and get around him. And Castellanos hasn't won the ball. As I say, if he touched the ball there and then Tom Cairney had kicked through him, fair enough. Foul the other way, totally agree. But he's not, and he's not attempted to play the ball either. I'm starting to fall on the side that I think it's a penalty.
I think my thing is, again, VAR, was it absolutely clear and obvious? We're here debating it. It is up for debate. And
I tell you what, it's clear and obvious that Tom Cairney kicks Tati Castellanos. So I suppose if that's your only definition of what the ruling is, then yeah, I suppose it is. But I don't know if that's correct. I don't see why you should be able to just put your leg in the way of someone kicking through and therefore it'd be a foul from them kicking you. If you're not trying to win the ball, that doesn't make sense to me. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm also willing to understand.
I think it's up for debate. When if something is up for debate or if something is a grey area, then that's when, for me, I don't think VAR should be getting involved. That's when I think that VAR should be looking at it and going, well, it's 6-1, half dozen the other, therefore we'll just go with the on-pitch decision. That's what I thought the whole referee's call was supposed to be about. But they disallowed that pretty quick last night. There wasn't much debate about it.
Yeah, there wasn't.
And I mean, like the whole night watching it on TNT, it felt like slightly like I was watching West Ham fan TV. And I get it that there was a narrative last night that like it felt like the wider football world wanted West Ham to win that, because I think everyone can smell blood with Tottenham, and for Tottenham to seriously be in a relegation battle, West Ham needed to win that game last night. So it felt like an element of the world is a little bit against us, just in terms of people aren't going to talk about that this morning, because ultimately everyone other than Fulham fans and Tottenham fans, and maybe I guess Leeds and Forest obviously, but are pretty happy that West Ham won this match of football, because it's potentially going to lead to the funniest outcome maybe in Premier League history. So I get that. But it doesn't mean we can't feel wronged by it. Rest of the game, Fulham then concede the most stupid goal. Bernd Leno leaves it for Calvin Bassey. Calvin's obviously not expecting Bernd to leave. I mean, in my mind, when goalkeepers are that far out, you do not take chances.
No.
Goalkeepers that far out of the box, I think if you're a defender, you rightly are just thinking, well, yeah, that might be my ball to take, but Bernd's not going to take any chances here, so I'm going to just let you deal with that and stick it and try and hit the commentators in the Riverside, ideally, because that's where I want this ball to be going.
If you're a keeper and you leave your box, like, you have to make sure that the ball either reaches the opposition half or it goes deeply out of play, right? Like, it's as simple as that. Unless you're like picking the ball up from your centre backs when they're passing it around. If you're leaving your box in a situation where someone is bearing down on you, you have to put the ball to safety. And look, I can understand there being a little bit of confusion and Bernd Leno thinking that Calvin Bassey was going to clear it fine. But like, it shouldn't have even fallen that far. Right, like it shouldn't even got to that point, because instead of trying to take the ball down in that situation, it should have gone into Rosette. And it's often not pretty. It would have been a bit of a groan moment and been like, oh, like, why have we let them take them on the counter? But that was happening, right? Every time that we threw bodies forward, there were counterattacks happening, especially in the second half. And ultimately, Bernd Leno has come out to determine what's happening in that situation. And then he's mucked it up, right, by trying to bring the ball down and trying to be clever. And look, again, there's frustrations with Bernd Leno that are starting to creep in, I think, across the fan base. Not that he hasn't been a wonderful servant for us.
Well, I've got an email here on this. Harrison Doyle said, he's been amazing for us. For what we spent, has to be one of the best signings in recent history. On top of that, when a goalkeeper makes a mistake, it's unfortunately the most notable mistake on the field. All that said, do we say Bernd has enough credit in the bank too often? I know Bassey had a hand in that West Ham goal too, but I hear us say Bernd has a lot of credit in the bank on a monthly basis. How much credit is still in that bank? Thanks for that. He says, Harrison says, I need the Fulhamish catharsis more than ever.
I think Fulham need to be thinking about this at the very least, bringing in someone who's going to, and look, we said it last summer, right? That instead of bringing in an experienced backup, and this is not to dunk on Benjamin Lecomte, who's done well every time he's played for us, right? But you should have brought in someone who was kind of like, okay, we've got a space coming up as a Premier League number one. You know, we're going to give you a year to settle in, and then, you know, we'll punch on it. And look, Georgi Petrovic was the one that I was speaking about last summer. He's obviously gone in and become a Premier League number one at Bournemouth and not had to wait a year for that. So, you know, you have to take all of these opportunities with a pinch of salt. Quivine Kelleher was never going to come in and be a number two for a year at Fulham when he was a number two at Liverpool. But I do wonder now if next year Fulham go and bring, I mean, look,
James Trafford is the one that stands out like a beacon, obviously.
Yeah, well, James Trafford, I think, is going to go to Villa when Emi Martinez leaves. So I think that's pretty much on the cards at this point. So that one comes into me and I look at it. But I do wonder about Aaron Ramsdale. Like, I do look at that at Newcastle. I think he's done well when he's been called upon. I think he's a good goalkeeper. He wasn't right for what, you know, that Arsenal were trying to do, but I think he makes good saves. I think he's a good shot stopper. And I reckon the fact that he's not been given the opportunities at Newcastle means that he's probably not going to sign for them. He's on loan from Southampton, who I don't think are going to come up from the Championship at this point.
And even if they did, like, Fulham could still put in a bid.
Yeah, I feel like that seems like a reasonable.
I just don't know why I'm just not that convinced by
I like Ramsdale.
It might be that it just might be like he might be unfortunately caught up in the stench of what happened to Southampton last season.
Yeah, I mean, he's also got like 3 relegations on his CV. It's not great stuff, but I do think he's a good goalkeeper, and I think that the opportunity has to come for him to be able to showcase that at some point.
Also, like there are plenty of great goalkeepers in Europe that we could go and pick up at the same time. There are plenty of goalkeepers that, for we're Premier League clubs now, other than the super clubs, can pretty much go and have their pick if they want. If it's a number 1 position at let's fingers crossed, say top 10 Premier League club, at least top 12, that's going to be very enticing to any goalkeeper unless you are at one of the super clubs.
Yeah,
that is the fortunate position that we are in. I think it's getting to the position now where I do think Bernd has cost us too many points. I don't think we need to try and bring in a goalkeeper that is Bernd Leno's number 2 for a season and we ease it in. I think we have to sometimes be ruthless. I think we have to be ruthless in the situation and just be like, we're looking for a new number 1. We got 4 great years out of Bernd Leno. It just fell away at the end. We're looking for a new number 1. I don't think that's. I think if you are a serious Premier League football club, you have to have these honest, difficult conversations. And look, Bernd no doubt will play in either the Forest or the Burnley game, produce some wonder saves, and the opposite will be saying, "Oh, everyone wrote him off. Everyone said it's done," and all of this. But I think with goalkeepers, if you are costing us the game 1 in every 5, which is currently his kind of hit record at the moment, then probably you're looking at it like it has to be time for a change. And it's unfortunate and it's sad, and Bernd does have a lot of credit in the bank. But I think occasionally, if you're a Premier League football club, you have to have these honest, difficult moments where you decide, actually, that's a position we're going to upgrade.
Yeah, 100%. I meant that number 2 thing is in last year, right?
Yeah, I know that.
This year. So it's one of those things where we have to kind of look at it in different lights. But yeah, it just is one of those where I think we're now at a point that changes probably do need to be made.
Well, look, let's just dive into Fulham's response to going 1-0 down. I must admit, as soon as that happened, and it's a good finish by Somerville. I think I saw some criticism of Sanderberg in there. Wasn't the best bit of defending in the world. I do think that Sanderberg runs the risk of a red if he absolutely clatters out Somerville there. With Bernd Leno in the position he is, I think that's you could potentially have argued that was denial of a goal scoring opportunity. So
yeah, there were lots of things you could criticise about Sanders' performance yesterday. I'm not 100% sure that's the one I'd be going for.
Yeah. Fulham's response then, we'd brought on our subs just before that, which probably wasn't ideal from Marco's point of view. On came Smith Rowe, on came Rodrigo Muniz, on came Oscar Bob. There's some mixed bags here. I thought Oscar Bob looked quite good and looked like the only one actually capable of doing something. I thought Muniz looked so ineffective. Every time the ball went in towards him, I was just like, well, this won't be a goal. And I know that the chances weren't gilt-edged chances at him, but occasionally I'm a bit like the Rodrigo Muniz I know would make much more of some of those headers that just kind of bomped off the top of his head.
The difference between Rodrigo and Raul in terms of winning the ball up high and bringing other people into play was so stark yesterday. I thought that Raul was one of the few players from a Fulham perspective that came out of this with their head held high. I thought he had a really good game in the first half in particular. I thought he battled incredibly hard. I thought he won the ball. And yes, there were a couple of moments of that's a little bit all over the place and a pass wasn't right, but everybody was guilty of that. But I thought he was very, very much the kind of shining light in that first half from a Fulham perspective. But Rodrigo, and I love Rodrigo to bits, right? But right now, he just doesn't really look like a footballer. He's just sort of charging around up top, sort of aimlessly, a bit like when he came in first. And it feels like all of the polish and the kind of cleanness that have been applied to his game in recent years that had seen him improve so aggressively is like one of those things where you're like, oh, it's now just fallen off a little bit again and we're back to square one. Now, maybe it's a question of fitness and look, this isn't me writing him off, but on performances like last night, even just some of the basic bits, like a header would be coming in and it'd just go up way too early for it and just miss the ball and it would just land at the defender's feet. It just felt really, really ineffective. And as you say, there was a lot of it that was ineffective yesterday. And we really struggled breaking down West Ham's low block as they, once they got the lead, they were happy to sit and defend it. And they defended it really well. And they deserve credit for closing down the gaps, etc. But it just really frustrated me that Fulham weren't trying to find Oscar Bob in those central areas. You're hoping that at that moment, you're thinking, right, Oscar, get in there, get off Muniz and just try and pick up the pockets. And the one time he did that, he beat two people on the edge of the box and eventually he gets crowded out, right? But you're thinking that's the way through. The way through is not going to be we're going to win crosses here against Disasi and Todibo, who were made to look excellent by us in that second half, I thought, which is incredibly annoying in so many different ways. But on top of that...
Fourth clean sheet of the season for West Ham.
Yeah, on top of that, you're really frustrated with the manner of the actual, the way we went about attacking, right? And it just felt like at no point did I feel like we were going to score. Even the Timothy Castagna chance feels like more luck than judgment, right? That it falls to him on the edge of the box. And yeah, it's a good save from Mads Hermansen. But in terms of where Fulham were creating chances and the opportunities we were trying to put in these places, it's just such a frustration watching us play like this and thinking, at no point here do we have really a pattern that's going to work. We'd get the ball into a wide area, we'd recycle it 3 or 4 times. We'd then try to release, a fullback getting onwards and they would swing it across goal and West Ham would clear it. It was like Groundhog Day in terms of how things are. And look, in general, I suppose it was a bit like Groundhog Day all round because, again, it's got to March. Again, Fulham have got that sniff of Europe and we've got that frustration of thinking, oh, okay, here we go again. We're going to drop points in games that we shouldn't. And look, to borrow something off my brother, we were talking about when we were coming back from the game yesterday. He was like, it's like that we get to this point and the players are like, do I want a trip to Azerbaijan on a Thursday? Like, do I actually want that? Like, or am I very happy sort of sinking into the mire and dealing with this and almost kind of just stepping back from it? And then almost, Fulham are 12th and it's like, did Fulham miss out on Europe? If you finish 12th, like probably not, right? There are 4 teams in between the European places. It's just so frustrating that, look, because it's such an odd position to be in, because we are still, I would say, slightly overachieving in terms of where we're at, but not by loads, like maybe by a position in terms of where this squad, the capability this squad has. I was talking about Newcastle, right? Just as a counterexample or a parallel. Talking about Newcastle and saying, and this week on the podcast, before they were listening to, before they beat Manchester United, we were saying every year Newcastle either qualify for the Champions League because they've had a good year because they're not playing European football, and then they get to the Champions League and they fall apart, and then they finish outside the Champions League places and they get knocked out in the knockout rounds of the Champions League, and then they go again. And at what point after like 3 or 4 times around that cycle do you start to go, well, because I've got to this point with Newcastle, well, Eddie Howe is clearly not the man to actually take this to the next step, right? Like at some point, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is madness. Mm-hmm. And whilst I am firmly and 100% in the camp that Marco should stay with this Fulham side, right? If someone made that same argument to me about Fulham and said, well, every year Fulham get to March and they're in touching distance of a European place and then they fall off for 3 months and then they're on the beach for 3 months and they end up finishing comfortably mid-table. I think because our expectations are we could end up getting drawn into a relegation battle and we've got comfortably clear of that. And, now we're at that point where, 10th, 11th is still a good season, right? From where we're standing. It's a difficult one to try and analyze. But if someone made the same argument to me that I'm making about Newcastle with Eddie Howe, would you be able to refute it in the same way?
No, I get it. I mean, I'm very much of this is still good, and finishing 10th is not a reason to change a manager, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
The whole situation needs to sort itself. Marco not signing the contract this long, the fact our manager is out of contract in 3 months now it's getting to the point where someone needs to take action. And I imagine that the heat on that during the international break, particularly the focus on that, will be pretty high. I just think that Fulham haven't got a ruthless edge to keep going and performing at the levels required without just dropping off that little bit. And last night was not a game to drop off. You had a hugely motivated team who have galvanised, who sniff survival, and for all of whom losing that match was not an option, and for Fulham winning that game was an option.
I don't think that's what played out yesterday. Like, if we had been battered into submission by a super physical West Ham side who just wanted it more than us, I would say, yeah, all right. Like, I would be frustrated still, but I would at least understand the context. That's not what played out in front of me last night, as far as I can see it. What happened was two incredibly poor teams, played that game, and we couldn't control the ball. The amount of times we passed the ball out of play, every pass was slightly behind or slightly in front of someone. There was nothing just quite to the to the moment. It felt like everything was super sloppy from like the 35th
That's
minute onwards.
What I'm trying to say is Fulham, it was just one of those performances last night where I just don't think Fulham have got that killer instinct in them to go and win 4 matches in a row.
Sure, but West Ham weren't good last night. Let's not have... They defended well at the end, right? But they score a goal that's a complete gift. And they counter-attacked, relatively well with Bowen and Somerville. But you'd say, like, those two players and no one else, right? It's Bowen and Somerville or bust from a West Ham perspective. And that's fine, right? Like, that might be enough. And all they need to do is survive here. This isn't me going at West Ham. Like, they have done what they needed to do in that game. And ultimately, they have taken the chance. And I can't even sit here and tell you that they didn't deserve to win the game because we gave them the opportunity to score the only real kind of chance of it. And how many times do we genuinely test Hermansen? Twice, the Josh King one at the end of the first half and the Timothy Castagna one at the end of the second half. That is not good enough for a team who were on home soil and expect to dominate against an opposition who are fighting for their lives and who are on, in the question of qualifying for Europe. If we want that, we have to be better. And the sloppiness that kind of came through it was mind-bendingly frustrating watching it in the stands and, seeing these passes roll out of play over and over again, the rust, the lack of precision. That's exactly the word I'm looking for. The lack of precision last night is what lost Fulham that game. And I don't even mean with the mistake from Bernd Leno, but there were moments over and over again where Fulham would start a really promising counter or they'd have a turn to take them out into open space and they'd pick the wrong pass or the pass would go out of play or someone would have to double back to pick up the pass on the touchline. And by that point, the momentum is gone. That is just so not acceptable. And I appreciate it's late in the season. I appreciate a lot of players have played a lot of minutes. Fine. Like, I get it. And maybe Harry Wilson on the pitch scores one of those opportunities that come to Chukwueze earlier in the half that end up down the throat of Hermansen, which I'm not even counting as proper saves because he caught them, right? But you look at them and you think, there's got to be something more in terms of being able to be sharp and open and ready to kind of pounce on opportunities, because it wasn't like the opportunities weren't there, especially I think in the first 60 minutes before we gave away the goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a blow. I mean, no one in the Premier League is consistent right now other than the top two. Like, everyone is losing games, and even Manchester United, who were on this great run, lost to 10-man Newcastle last night. If we'd have lost to 10-man Newcastle last night, we'd be livid, and our expectations are nowhere near as high. I mean, it is a really difficult league, and Wolves beat Liverpool the other day, right? It's showing just what the quality level of this league is, and no one's putting, everyone thought Brentford were on a run, and they lost to Brighton. Like, They are, and they've drawn with Bournemouth. Like, no one is actually necessarily putting together the sequence of wins. But Fulham did have an opportunity here. The fixtures had played out. And me and you sat here 2 weeks ago saying there's no way Fulham win all of these games. And that's exactly what's played out. It's just quite predictable. But I think the most frustrating thing about last night is if Marco had played his first choice team, or played the team that we all think he should have, i.e. Chukwueze had to come in for Wilson, etc., and we'd still have lost this game, I'd be like, well, it's just kind of Fulham being Fulham, and I wouldn't be here excusing it and being like, it's all right. But I think what the most frustrating thing about last night is actually, like, why did we do that to ourselves? And actually, you talked about the response in the last 20, 30 minutes. I don't think it was coincidence that players that have been starting for Fulham weren't particularly effective at coming off the bench for us last night. I don't think Smith Rowe was quite as good as he has been when starting. And the fact that he didn't bring on Sessegnon until the moment that he did, and then kind of, I don't even know where Sessegnon was playing. I think right.
He was playing on the right, but like
it felt like he was in the centre half the time. But
he kept trying to make the out to in run, which I actually thought was probably the smartest move in the moment. I thought Sess did okay when he came on, to be honest. Like, he wasn't particularly effective, but I thought that he made the right kind of runs and he was trying to get into the right kind of spaces and pockets. So I'm not particularly critical. I thought Castagna did well as well, to be honest, added a little bit of life, and I was a bit wary of that substitution. But just for a moment, can we talk about Sander Berge? Because this was, I came out and really defended Sander last week. I don't think he's been as bad as he's been made out to be at times. Yesterday, he was all over the place in the middle of the park. Now, I will still say that when Sander does something good, it's never recognised, and when he does something bad, everybody groans all the time, and that continues to happen, right? Like, at one point, he took a touchdown of a ball that looked like it should just be headed out. Like, he controlled it really beautifully, and then the ball ran out of play from the control, and everyone groaned. But if Sander Berge had just headed that straight out of play, everyone would have been like, yeah, fair enough. And it's like, okay, fine, but we've got to appreciate that if he's done something excellent there, yes, it's frustrating that the ball's gone out. If he just headed that out as a defensive clearance, most of us would have been pretty pleased with it. So, you do have to take it all in context. But he was really, really, really messy, I thought, with his passing yesterday. Everything felt very clunky and heavy in the middle of the park. And it's one of those where you're thinking, might be time to bring him off, Marco. Now, Sasha has returned to the bench for the last 2 games. We haven't seen anything of him yet. Yesterday felt like the kind of game where Sasha's tidiness and kind of metronomic form in the middle would have just helped Fulham to tick and open things up. Now, if Sasha isn't ready to play, then fine, but don't put him on the bench. Like, it's as simple as that. If he's not ready to actually make an impact, then don't put him on the bench. And if he is, then not bringing Berge off earlier yesterday and not bringing Sasha on, I think was a huge mistake on Marco's part.
This episode of the Fulhamish podcast is brought to you by our friends at My Kind of Cruise, the world's first cruise booking app and website. My Kind of Cruise allows you to compare different cruises from all across the globe, and they've got some great offers on right now, including on Fred Olsen cruises. Now, Fred Olsen cruises allow you to go to some pretty awesome destinations. You can go to Spain and Portugal, you can go up to Scandinavia, you can go up and see the Northern Lights. Any Fred Olsen cruise that you book right now, you'll get £200 extra to spend on board. But they're not limited to Fred Olsen cruises. Whatever package you go for, My Kind of Cruise has you covered. And Fulhamish listeners get an exclusive discount at checkout by using the code Fulhamish. So go to My Kind of Cruise, founded by a fellow Fulham fan, so you'll be supporting one of our own if you book a cruise through them. That's My Kind of Cruise, proud sponsors of Fulhamish in 25-26. Let's move on to the Southampton game on Sunday in the FA Cup 5th round. Midday kickoff in this one. Ticket sales, I don't know if you've seen, Jack, are currently abysmal. It's not the first time that we've said this before an FA Cup match, and actually the stands do fill out more than you expect because everyone knows that there's no need to buy your ticket in advance. People just kind of do it the day before or on the day. Obviously, I think the price goes up on the day, but right now it's literally a sea of blue available seats, particularly in the Hammersmith end, and the sides of the Johnny Haynes, and I hope that's not the case. I mean, we've been stitched up in numerous ways. This being a Sunday midday is an awful kickoff time. I know I always have a go at the club for pricing. I do wonder if, I'm not saying that £30 for a Hammersmith end ticket is extortionate or anything like that, but at the same time, I find it surprising that the club doesn't go for these kind of games. Oh, let's just fill it out. I mean, we have to give away, I think 55% of the gate receipts anyway to both the FA and or Southampton. So I really don't see why Fulham try and maximise that much when it's not even us that really gets even the vast majority of the proceeds. But we're not going to do another ticket price thing today. We did it to death last week. Let's just look at the game that we've got ahead of us. Look, it's obviously we've been given a kind draw here. I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to turn up and win, and if we play like we did on Wednesday, then that's definitely not the case. What do you think Fulham will go for in terms of lineup here? Because we sort of played the cup team last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I assume that some of the players get rested. So let's say Lecomte probably starts. Let's say Castagna probably starts. I think Cuenca probably starts. I don't know who starts between Anderson and Diop on the right now. Has Diop just done enough to be like, because he was excellent again, to be honest. I thought he was one of the few bright lights. Him and Bassey, I thought both did well. But so I think Cuenca comes in. Is this Robinson trying to get some fitness? Does he start again on it in terms of where he's at? I'm not 100% sure. I'd imagine we maybe see Harrison and Sasha.
Yeah.
Like, this might be the game that he soft launches Sasha Lukic back into. Then maybe it's Josh again in the 10. Maybe Bob starts on one wing. We don't have loads of options, do we? Chukwueze on the other. And Mooney's up top.
Yeah, I that's pretty much what I'd go for. Yeah, unless you can put Sessegnon on the wing again, Robinson at left back if you are trying to. For me with Robinson, I don't know. Part of me thinks, the fitness is still not 100% there because he has missed games. Do you just try and give him now like the 10, 11 days break? I mean, he'll be on the bench, no doubt. But do you try and give him the 10, 11 days that he would then have to Nottingham Forest and just put Sess at left back because he's there and he's available? I mean, I don't
know. Look, with Robinson, it's probably worth talking about this. Like with Anthony Robinson last night, I thought that actually some of the speed had returned. I thought that he looked quick again. And there have been periods where I was like, oh, he doesn't look quite as fast. But he looked, and he did do that thing where he tried to jump for a ball and it actually got to the ball, but the touch was poor and therefore he got caught out in the same kind of way. For me, it was the technicality yesterday that was missing. Like the touches felt awry right from the beginning. That Jarrod Bowen to Tasti Castellanos chance that happens at the start is Robinson's fluffed clearance. And I didn't think his touch got much better from that moment onwards. It felt like the technical side of his game is the thing that's letting him down at the moment. I think the speed is returning. So with that, maybe you do try to like knock it out of him. And I would play Chukwueze again because he looks rusty and like has done, I thought, for the last couple of games since he's come back. Like his inability to take a man on yesterday was bizarre, especially in the second half, just not wanting to go at his fullback. And bear in mind, he was up against Wan-Bissaka, who was on a yellow card for diving in the first half.
Yeah, it was odd. He kept just doing long crosses and you were like, and there was the one that was right at the end where it just deflected into Hermanson's arms and you were just like, why are you not like why are you trying to cross it from the byline? Like, I know some players can. Kenny Tete's quite good at the old looping cross like that.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. But anyway, I would be trying to play Samuel Chukwueze back into form.
Do we think there's an element of we shouldn't be playing the cup team? We should be playing the first team, especially after what happened last night.
Well, I mean, I suppose the question is like, which of the first... So who comes back in for the first team? So if the first team is now, Bernd Leno... You think the Leno comes out, right? Tete's played a lot of games.
But in some ways, why should Leno come out?
Well, one, because he was rubbish yesterday. And two, yeah. I don't think Lecomte's done enough. I don't think there's that much of a difference in terms of what happens there. I think Lecomte's been fine.
Yeah. Ultimately, this is not this is a Southampton team that are flying at the moment. This is not going is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I just wonder if, at what point do we actually just go, it's a fifth round FA Cup match. There's a quarter final at stake here. Just play the first. Let's not do the whole Harrison Reed. Let's give Sasha Lukic some minutes. I just wonder if actually we should be playing pretty much the same team other than fitness and injuries.
Yeah, I get that, but also if we roll the same team out that played against West Ham, they play like that, we'll lose.
No, I get but trying to pull in back Smith Rowe into the 10, Iwobi back into midfield. I don't mean play the West Ham team. Clearly, we found out that's not the solution. I just mean play the Spurs team minus enforced changes. Yeah, it's just I just don't know at what. But maybe that's unnecessary for Southampton to cut. Maybe players need minutes, but at what point, 8 games from the end of the season, do we stop worrying about giving Harrison Reed minutes and start just playing the team that's going to hopefully get Fulham towards Wembley? I wonder at what point.
To be fair to Harrison, he is the man who literally scored the goal that put us in this round. So there is that to consider, I suppose. Like the flip side of that, Sammy, I would say, is that which players yesterday legitimately earned their chance to start in this game? If we're talking about this as a big game, who put their hat in the ring and went, you know what, I need to be playing in that game? Raul.
Yeah, Raul, exactly. Don't play Muniz.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be fair, I would be absolutely fine with that. But also at some point,
I'd write like Diop and Bassey. Like they're the starting centre backs right now. Should we be playing them? I don't know what Marco's going to. For what it's worth, I think Marco's just going to play a rotated side, and I understand the reasons for rotated sides. I just wonder at what point do you, because then but then quarterfinal, is that the moment actually where you play first team? Maybe, but it'd be absolutely.
If it's City away, I'd send the reserves.
But if we lose this one, I think a lot of people are going to be. I mean, I don't think Fulham fans would be absolutely. I think a lot of people would lose their heads if we lose this.
Yeah, I think so too. But actually, more than that, I think everyone will just become incredibly apathetic about the rest of the season.
It's on a precipice. And I can't believe I'm saying this, because 24 hours ago, it all just felt like there was all like a world of opportunity ahead of us. And I guess that's the fickle nature of being a football fan, right? I don't know how much you've seen of Saints, but they obviously have been on a bit of a tear up in recent weeks. Obviously, their most recent win was away at Sheffield Wednesday, which you can't really talk about. And then they battered QPR 5-0. I did actually see the goals in that game, and Southampton looks good. Draw against Charlton, they beat Leicester in the FA Cup to get them here. They had that crazy game against Leicester the game before in the Championship, where they were 3-0 down at half time and they came back to win 4-3, the highlights of which are absolutely insane. I think this is a good Southampton team, but and they are on good form, but I think you actually look at some of those results, and there are caveats to some of those wins, right? I think the Borough game that we played earlier in the season was a tougher test than Southampton will pose. And
maybe.
And what you said a couple of weeks ago, what we probably want is Southampton to feel like they've got a sniff of the playoffs, and they've got more than a sniff of the playoffs. They are right on it right now. And so, is the FA Cup of any concern to Southampton or their fans? Obviously, no fan wants to lose a game, and a cup quarter final is always exciting. But yeah, you've got to wonder about the differing motivations here.
Yeah, I do wonder what side we see from Saints, right? Like, and look, Thunder Eckert's done a really good job. He came in as the under-21s manager and when Will still had the job, and then was appointed to interim, and has really kind of turned things around, I think, as they've charged up the table in recent weeks. They seem to have stumbled across a solution at the point where you're thinking, okay, what's this? What's this look like next? And so, look, I think that we should probably look at this and say this is a difficult test. In terms of, this is a side who are feeling themselves right now, who have a lot of good players, but also who have a really settled side. How much that changes here, because they are 4 points off the playoffs and chasing down Wrexham in that final spot. That is probably the thing that you look at and say, okay, right, is that the priority for the season? You would assume so. Right. But they've also brought in some interesting players, I think, from their perspective. They've scored some really good goals. I think Finn Azaz is a wonderful footballer. I'm not saying that because I also watch him on the international stage, but he's been really, really good in the Championship for a while. Obviously, we've seen him score a wonder goal at the Cottage before for Watford. Cienza on the left-hand side has been a bit of a revelation, as has Matsuki on the right. So it does feel like they've got some sensible bits. The midfield has depth in there, which I think is going to be interesting who actually starts here, because, Finn Downs missed the last game, but, that was Shea Charles that stepped into the breach. They have a number of different players who can kind of do a job in those areas. A young Cam Bragg as well has seemed to have a bit of a breakout campaign in the last couple of weeks, which I think is interesting. But it's a good side, right? Like, there's still a lot of players here who played at the very top of the Championship or in the Premier League. You look at that back line of James Bree, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, Jack Stevens, Ryan Manning. Like, all four of those are, if not lower Premier League quality half players, if not Premier League lower half quality players, then top of the Championship quality players. And that's a very solid baseline from which to work. We have to be wary of this, but I do wonder how many changes they make, because if it is all hands to the pump on trying to catch Wrexham in that final spot, they've got another game away at West Brom on Wednesday. And look, West Brom are in dreadful form, but then on Saturday they play Coventry. They feel like big games for Saints. And I wonder if the FA Cup is potentially a distraction. I suppose the flip side of that is, if you're on a winning run and you're feeling yourselves at the moment, you want to continue that in all competitions, even if there's more games. So it could be interesting, I think.
All right, we will leave it there for the podcast today. Jack, before we finish, what do you think we should name the pod?
Yeah, so obviously I love both Forever Blowing Opportunities and Burn's Birthday Befuddlement, but I actually don't think they're particularly good pod names.
Right.
So I'm going to go back to what you said right at the start and go with Londinium Callings, Hammer and Wrongs.
Very, very nice. All right. Thank you very much for listening and watching the podcast today. We will be back on Monday with the podcast looking back at the Southampton game in the FA Cup, and hopefully we will be through to the quarter finals. But we do need to play an awful lot better than we did on Wednesday night in order to achieve that. Jack Collins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. Always a pleasure.
And we will see you very soon. You Whites.
You Whites.